You know David Pearson as the Silver Fox. He was one of the greatest drivers in stock car racing history and a member of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. But did you know that he once ended a fight with a young up-and-coming driver by the name of Tim Richmond with a single punch? And did you know that it all took place on one of the most historic days the sport has ever known? Yep, sure did. This episode is brought to you by Petty vs. Pearson, the rivalry that shaped NASCAR. Available now from your local Barnes & Noble or via barnesandnoble.com. July 4th, 1984, the Firecracker 400 at Daytona. Ronald Reagan was there. Richard Petty won the 200th race of his career after a fender-banging duel with Cale Yarborough. But back in the garage, all hell was breaking loose between David Pearson, who had long since established himself as a NASCAR legend, and Tim Richmond, who had already shown some flashes of brilliance with 4 wins to his credit at that point. But in a fight between David Pearson and Tim Richmond, who do you think won? John Dodson was working for Richmond's Blue Max racing team at the time, and he was there. He saw it all.
One good story is at Daytona when Tim Brewer was the crew chief. It's the Firecracker 400. And Tim radios in and says David Pearson won't get out of the way. It's a Chattanooga Choo car, and he was smoking. And Tim Brewer said, well, they've black flagged him. Don't pay any attention. It's 5 laps to go. And, so Tim takes the information, Tim Richmond, well, they've black flagged him. He shouldn't be out here anyway. So he flips the bird to David Pearson. An Indian.
Yeah.
Yeah. David Pearson's got Indian blood in him. He flips the bird to David Pearson. Tim really basically told him it wasn't true. I'm not saying Tim lied to him. Yeah, Tim was saying, don't pay any attention to him. Just finish the race. And no, Richmond's got a flip in the bird. So Richmond radios and says, hey, I think he's mad. I think Pearson's mad. Maybe you better come down here. Well, Tim was a wimp. Richmond. Yeah. Tim Brewer was not. Tim Brewer will fight a brick wall. Yeah, he's like me. Well, Tim Brewer says, John, go get with Tim. Run. Well, I was sort of a hothead then. I got in fights at the Winston All-Star race. Yeah. I got bit. I got in a fight at Wilkesboro. I was the scrapper. I'm the enforcer, you might say, back in those days. But I was hot-blooded. But, it was a team sport, and you don't mess with my team. I run down pit road, and when Tim's coming off the track, he stops before going behind, and I get in the car. He's like, come on.
You're joking.
No, protect me from David Pearson. I'm 19, I'm 20 years old. So we got out of the car and said, he's mad, and I'm riding in on the car. I've run 180 with Tim sitting in the floorboard at Daytona on a test down there just to go out and see if the track was wet. So that's another story. That's the next story. So anyway, we drive into the garage and we pull into the thing, and you can tell he's like, man, he's pissed. David Pearson, I hope he don't come over here. Well, by the time he gets out of the car, here comes Pearson. And I mean, his nose to nose right here. And he says, I'm not going to cuss, and I'm going to say the things he said, but basically, don't you ever point that finger at me. I'll break it off and stick it blank, 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 or whatever. And Pearson's this close to him. He had enough, and we're in the last stall. Here's the garage wall. The old garages at Daytona. And you got a doorway to walk out of. And he basically just comes up and hits Tim like just, boom. He just melts into that block wall. Richmond does. He's just one punch, and Pearson's just standing there like, you gonna give me a finger again? Like this young kid.
Hey, you're supposed to be protecting him.
It wasn't time. And the other thing is, he needed it. He needed that. Tim Richmond needed that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't come in here and disrespect these, Hall of Famers like David Pearson.
Yeah.
And he it's just like, think about how Keselowski came in the sport and everybody wrecked him. And, different drivers.
Yeah.
You're going to earn your way in here. So I think Tim Richmond grew a lot that right there. But he punched him against that wall, and then everybody grabbed Pearson. Pearson's like, I'm done. I don't need to do any more. They're lace, you know. And I'm like, man, I'm glad I never messed with David Pearson. So I go back with Tim. I get him up, you know. We go back, and he gets between the trucks. I quit. And he's throwing his gloves and goes up in the truck. And I quit, and I ain't driving anymore. And I'm like, you know, whatever. He drove again, but I was there for it. But again, he needed that.
And that was Richard Petty's 200th win that day.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. That's the day that we saw Reagan.